Hello chess friends, in this video we are going to have a look at the semi-final of the Freestyle Chess Goat Challenge in Weissenhaus, Germany. It's the game between world's #1 Magnus Carlsen, and he's playing in a man who is in super form, Nodibek Abdusattorov. He managed to win the group stage very convincingly, but now these results, they don't count anymore. It's a new game, a new starting position, and it's going to be a thriller of a game. Let's see what happens in this game. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Let's help growing the channel together. Then I will show you what happened in this game as Magnus starts this position with the move 1g4. And this is really funny because normally 1g4, it's called the GROB opening. It has a very dubious reputation, but now on this score sheets the players were using in this tournament, there's this special space where you could also write down the name of the opening, and Magnus even wrote down it's the GROB. Well, we know in the GROB you develop your bishop to g2, but that's not a possibility here. Magnus has a totally different approach. Let's see what happens in the game. e5 played in the game, and now the knight comes out to g3. So white is trying to get a nice grip on the f5 square. Maybe later the knight can actually go there. Let's see if that's really going to work out in this game. Black played a move f6, opening up the diagonal for the bishop. And white played a very interesting move, sort of a gambit, as he played a move d4, placing the pawn in the center, and that pawn can just be taken by black. But Abdusattorov didn't capture the pawn. If you take the pawn on d4, well, there are various ways of playing here. One logical idea could be to play the move f4, so that now you have two nice pawns next to each other. White is about to regain the pawn on d4 with the bishop. Well, we don't know what would have happened because Abdusattorov didn't capture the pawn. Knight b6 was played, and also Magnus brings out his knight, this time to d3, putting pressure against the pawn on e5, and still the pawn on d4 of course can be taken, but Abdusattorov says, okay, I'm playing the move d6. Understandable, he's trying to support the pawn on e5, but I don't like it too much because the bishop on b8 is now kind of stuck behind its own pawns. But Abdusattorov has a different plan in mind. White played the move f3, protecting the pawn, and this is the moment Abdusattorov captures on d4. Bishop takes, and now he strikes in the center by placing the pawn on c5, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes back to f2, and here various interesting moves. The move I like the most here for black is just to play bishop c7 with the idea to castle next, but Abdusattorov plays very energetically and play the move c4, hitting the knight on d3. But before moving the knight, look what Magnus did. He captured the knight on b6, so that after pawn takes, only move because you have to solve the check, the knight can now safely go to b4. This is a good square for the knight. And after playing the move d5, white played the move c3. So the knight can never be chased away by a black pawn. The bishop will quickly join play as well. And next, very likely, white is going to castle. Well, let's see if that's happening. Bishop to f4. Should be clear, by the way, that the pawn on d5 cannot be taken. It's protected by the bishop, and with black's last move, bishop f4, black is trying to keep that king in the center, and the question is what white should do about it. Well, Magnus played the move knight h5. There's also something to say for the move knight f5, attacking the pawn from a different angle, but the main difference is that now after something like g6, you can even play the move e3, tickle this bishop, so the bishop will be forced to move. Well, that's probably somewhat better for white, but knight h5 also a very interesting move, putting pressure against the bishop on f4. Bishop h6 played, black protects the pawn and keeps the bishop on this diagonal. And now Magnus, his idea is to expand on the king side by playing the move f4. Now the bishop is out of play. Castling queenside. Black is the first one to castle in this game. Now the knight goes back to g3. It has done its job on h5. It was out of play there. And it also has a nice idea that you would like to come in with a knight to f5, or possibly even play the move bishop f5 and then get your king into safety by castling queenside. Well, anyway, we understand now the move g6. Black covers the f5 square, preventing a white piece from coming there. And here Magnus played the move e3, overprotecting the pawn on f4. Queen d7 played with the idea to attack the pawn on g4. You can play a move like h3 to protect it, but queen e2 was played, also protecting the pawn. And Abdusattorov slowly improves all its pieces. Now the rook is on the half open file, hitting the pawn on e3. And well, there are different ways of playing. And frankly speaking, when I was looking at the position, I was expecting white here to play the move bishop c2, finally with the idea to get some sort of a normal game by castling queenside to connect the rooks. But okay, it's not a good move here because it will be met by bishop f8. Sometimes black has the possibility to take the knight. Another idea could be to place the bishop on c5 and hit the pawn on e3. Magnus had all seen this, and instead of playing the move bishop c2, he dropped back with the knight to c2. Very interesting maneuver, as he's protecting the pawn, and anytime the knight can just come to d4. Bishop f8 was played in the game with idea to come to c5. You can maybe play a move like a knight d4, but Magnus says, I'm playing here b4 so that your bishop can never come to the c5 square. Very ambitious move. White is placing its central pawns on dark square, so the bishop is good. It's becoming more a static type of position, which can favor easily the side with the extra knight. Bishop e6, hitting the pawn on g4 one more time. White played the move h3. And what should black do? Well, difficult to say. There's a possibility to play f5, but Abdusattorov is playing for the initiative. Played here the move h5, very sharp move, putting pressure against that pawn on g4. And well, there are different ways, different moves possible here. You don't really want to take on h5 because then the pawn on h3 can be taken, the rook is under threat later, the bishop can come to g4. So Magnus played here the move knight to d4. Understandable, probably not the best move, but Abdusattorov made a serious mistake here by capturing the pawn on g4, as he certainly overlooked white's next move, f5. This is a big move, very important move, hitting the bishop. And if you do take the pawn, black has a beautiful pawn block on the king side, but it tactically fails to knight takes e6. If you do take back either with the queen or the rook, it's bishop takes f5 with a huge pin on this diagonal. White is about to win the exchange. So rather than taking on f5, black decided to drop back with the bishop, but now after h takes g4, white has a very nice grip on the king side thanks to the pawn on f5. And also look at that knight on h8, it's just out of play. White is in good shape here. Queen c7, attacking the knight on g3. Queen f3, protecting the knight. Bishop h6, attacking the pawn on e3. White simply defends it with rook e1. And now the move bishop to g5, improving the bishop a bit, overprotecting the pawn on f6. And now still this rook on a1 is out of play. Bishop c2, it's still an option, but Magnus has a totally different idea. And he wants to activate the rook in a different way by playing the move a4. He is about to play the move a5, challenge that pawn on b6, intending to open up the file for the rook, and then the black king can easily get in trouble. Pawn takes f5 was played. Two options, well, two options. You have many options here to recapture on f5. Taking with a knight looks quite nice, but bishop takes f5 was played as instead. So that's a good move. It's check. The king got to go into the corner, and now to my surprise, Magnus doesn't continue with that plan of opening up that side of the board with the move a5. Instead, he starts here with the move rook e2. Probably he wants to maintain the tension and swing over with the rook via the second rank and then play a5. But here, okay, Abdusattorov had another possibility. Play the move knight g6. Great move with ideas to come in to e5 to hit the queen, or maybe to come in with the knight to d3 later on. Anyway, Magnus decided now to take on g6. That's a remarkable decision, but not a bad one. After bishop takes, black has the bishop pair. These bishops, they look great, but after the move knight gf5, the knights are fantastically placed on nice outposts. No pawns of black able to kick out these knights, and white is in control. Queen e5 played, and still interesting possibilities here, including castling queenside on move 29. This is how strange freestyle chess can get. Anyway, Magnus now played the move a5. He's looking for action against the black king, and here Abdusattorov made a serious mistake by offering the exchange of queens. What should he have done is probably just take first on a5. After rook takes, now the exchange of queens is absolutely acceptable. After the exchange of queens, if you come over with the rook, there are ideas to infiltrate, but after king c7, black is okay. The best thing you can do here as white is give a check. Now you cannot go to the d file as it hangs the pawn on d5. If you go back, the only thing white can do is go back as well, and then you have a repetition of moves. The difference with the game's continuation is that after queen e4, the queens are coming off the board, and white can even capture with the pawn on b6, and that's very important pawn as it kind of boxes in that king on the queen side. Rook takes g4 played, rook ae2 on the board, threatening checkmate on a8, and you can't run away with the king. If you do that, there follows a check on a8, you trade off one pair of rooks, the other rook will come in, and after king d7, rook b8, the b pawn is about to fall, and with the support of the two knights and the rook, this b pawn should just be promoted, or white can even consider playing for checkmate with the knights as well. So instead, black played here the move rook to g1 check, king goes to e2. At least by trading off one pair of rooks, the mating threat is gone, but the position is very difficult to handle because of that pawn on b6. Now, white has various ideas, including the activation of the rook via a5, keeping an eye on that pawn on d5. Here, Abdusattorov, under huge pressure, played the move rook e8, but that also allows this move, rook h1. The rook is fantastically placed on the h file, looking for opportunities to infiltrate, because if this rook is no longer on the back rank, it could easily be just checkmate thanks to that pawn. For instance, the following line, after rook f8, I don't think this is a good move, to be honest, because after this move, white played the move knight d6. The knight infiltrates with the point that the other knight will come to e6. Now, for instance, even if you hit the knight on d6 by playing a rook d8, it's knight e6 attacking the rook, and there's not a good square for the rook available. If you take on d6, it's rook h8 with checkmate. That's the exact plan I mentioned before. Instead, maybe you can start with bishop d3, but after king f2, the position gets worse every move. Knight e6 is about to be played. The ensuing endgame is completely lost. For instance, if you play f5, it's knight e6, hitting the rook and the bishop. So a lot of tactics with these knights and the pawn on b6. In fact, after the move knight d6, Abdusattorov resigned. May look premature, but the longer you look at this position, the more you appreciate the strength of these knights dominating the center, taking away threats, squares from the opponent's pieces, and very soon the rook is about to enter. So, remarkable end to a game. Really good middle game fight with an original opening. Of course, with freestyle chess, you will not get any opening theory. So, it was a really good fight. I really think we saw the best game of Magnus in this tournament so far. And now, the man in great shape, Abdusattorov, is in a must-win situation. He needs to bounce back tomorrow in a classical game to force a tiebreak. Let's see if he's capable of doing that, or otherwise Magnus will move on to the finals. Let's see what's going to happen. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon again. Bye-bye.